Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Dr. Tawseef Anwar. Today I will discuss an important topic which is peripheral neuropathies and related disorders. Neuropathy is defined as a disease or injury of the peripheral sensory, motor or autonomic nerves. This is different from neuronopathy, which means selective injury to the cell body of the axon, or radiculopathy, which means injury to the nerve roots distal to their origin, or plexopathy, which means injury to the brachial or lumbosacral plexus. Neuropathy may be pure motor, pure sensory, or mixed sensory motor. It may occur symmetrically throughout the body, where it is called polyneuropathy, or it may involve individually a single nerve when it is called mononeuropathy, or it may involve multiple scattered nerves in an irregular distribution, which is called multifocal neuropathy. Autonomic neuropathy may accompany a larger neuropathic process or may occur independently. Peripheral nerves consist of an electrically active core, which is known as axon, and an external fatty layer of electric insulation known as myelin sheath. Axonal integrity is critical to action potential progression and propagation along the cellular membrane of either motor or sensory nerves. Injury to the axon at any point along its course may block transmission. Myelin is also critical to impulse transmission along the length of the axon. It increases conduction velocity through the saltatory conduction, in which an impulse leaps from node to node between myelin segments. Demyelination may disrupt saltatory conduction, leading to slowness of nerve conduction and decreased velocity. Pathologically, nerve injury can be divided into four major categories. Number one, neuronal degeneration, which results from damage to the motor or sensory nerve cell bodies with subsequent degeneration of their contiguous peripheral axons. Number two, Wallerian degeneration, which results from damage to the axon at a specific point below the cell body with degeneration distal to the injury. Number three, axonal degeneration, which results from diffuse axonal damage. Because the distal portion of the axon is farthest from the cell body, it undergoes the earliest and most severe change during diffuse neuronal injury, accounting for initial symptoms in the feet and hands, followed by gradual proximal ascent with continued injury. Number four, segmental demyelination, which results from injury to the myelin sheath without injury to the axons. Mononeuropathies most commonly occur due to entrapment injuries like medial nerve entrapment leading to carpal tunnel syndrome, and ulnar and peroneal nerve entrapment at elbow and knee respectively. They can also result from multifocal demyelination from ischemic injury as a result of occlusion of the vascular supply to the individual nerves, or from trauma. Polyneuropathies have hundreds of potential etiologies. One of the most common is diabetes mellitus, which is the commonest cause of polyneuropathy worldwide. Another important cause is leprosy, which is an infectious cause. Other causes include toxic substances, inflammatory diseases, and malignancies. The total prevalence of chronic symmetrical polyneuropathy is estimated to be approximately 3.5% in outpatient elderly population. This slide summarizes the common compressive mononeuropathies, their sites of entrapment and causes of compression. This slide summarizes common causes of polyneuropathies. These include genetic disorders like hereditary motor sensory neuropathies and acquired causes, which include infections like leprosy, HIV infection, borreliosis or Lyme disease, inflammatory diseases like acute inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy (RGP syndrome), CIDP, collagen vascular diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis, Sjogren's syndrome, and vasculitides. Systemic diseases include diabetes mellitus, coronary renal failure, thyroid dysfunction, especially hypothyroidism, parathyroid disorders, paraneoplastic syndromes, paraproteinemias, amyloidosis, vitamin B12 deficiency, and acute intermittent porphyrias. There are many toxins and drugs which can lead to polyneuropathies. These include chemotherapeutic agents, antivirals, statins, alcohol and hydrocarbons, arsenic, poisoning. Different types of polyneuropathies and polyradiculopathies share many clinical features in common. These include weakness or paresis, weak or absent reflexes, muscle atrophy, sensory deficits and positive sensory phenomena like paresthesias, dysesthesias, burning, with or without pain. These manifestations of polyneuropathies start distally in a symmetric fashion. Rarely it may be asymmetrical. Usually symptoms start from the lower limbs. Progression may be slow or rapid, and there may be involvement of autonomic nervous system. The extent, severity and distribution of these manifestations vary from patient to patient. In particular, radiculopathic processes are clinically distinguishable from exclusive neuropathic processes. The diagnostic evaluation of a patient with suspected neuropathy begins with a comprehensive history, general physical examination and neurological examination. Several blood studies are done, including complete blood count, TSR, C-reactive proteins, thyroid hormone levels, renal profile, and many other blood studies which include assays for antibodies directed against specific nerve or myelin components, some of which may be associated with specific clinical syndromes such as anti-GM1 antibody, which is specific for acute motor axonal neuropathy, and anti-GQ1B antibodies, which is found in Miller-Fisher variant of GB syndrome. Anti-HU antibody, which is commonly found in carcinomatous paraneoplastic sensory neuropathy. Anti-myelin associated glycoproteins antibody, which is found in multiple myeloma. And anti-sulfatide antibody, which is found in symmetric polyneuropathy with prominent distal sensory loss. Other lab tests which may be needed include serologies for HIV and hepatitis infection, serum cryoglobuline levels, and serum and urine heavy metal screening may be needed. Lumbar puncture is especially important for the diagnosis of acute inflammatory demyelinating polyradiculopathy, which is known as Guillain-Barré syndrome, and chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, The single most important diagnostic test for the evaluation of neuropathy is nerve conduction studies and EMG, electromyography. Nerve biopsy may be needed in some cases. The indications for nerve biopsy are highly limited. The most common site of nerve biopsy is the sural nerve at the ankle. It carries a 10 to 15% risk of chronic neuropathic pain at the biopsy site. This slide summarizes the genesiological tests and immunological screening for different conditions, which is routinely performed in all cases of polyneuropathies. Now we will discuss some specific types of polyneuropathies and polyradiculopathies. One of the most important is Guillain-Barré syndrome, also known as Landry-Guillain-Barré syndrome. It is a classic example of polyradiculitis. Acute polyradiculitis is characterized by rapidly ascending paralysis or paresis and only mild sensory disturbances. In severe cases, the cranial nerves and autonomic system can be involved. Weakness usually improves spontaneously in all involved muscles. Those muscles which became weak first recover last. The prognosis is favorable. It can strike at any age. The annual incidence is from 0.5 to 2 cases per 100,000 per year. Usually it appears in the spring or fall season. Etiology and pathogenesis. This syndrome has more than one causes and etiology often remains unclear. In some patients, the illness is preceded by Mycoplasma pneumonia infection or by infection with varicella zoster virus, that is also known as chickenpox, paramyxovirus, HIV, Epstein-Barr virus, and Campylobacter jejuni. These are also considered in its pathogenesis. Campylobacter jejuni infection produces axonal lesions and it is associated with a particularly severe form of the illness and worse prognosis. Immunological processes play an important role in the pathogenesis. In particular, anti-viral antibodies are often found. Anti-GD1A antibodies are sometimes found in a rare form of GB syndrome that involves axon degeneration, but this is not found in the most common demyelinating forms. The first sign is weakness of the lower limbs, which starts distally. Occasionally it is preceded by an upper respiratory tract infection or gastrointestinal infection. Usually there is no fever. Weakness ascends within a few hours or days and the patient may become unable to walk. Distal paresthesias and sensory disturbances are common but much less disturbing to the patient than the weakness. Though the weakness ascends rapidly, its ultimate extent is variable. In very severe cases, the upper limbs, diaphragm and accessory muscles of respiration are affected within a few days of onset, as well as the muscles of the head and neck that are supplied by cranial nerves. Inability to swallow and bilateral facial palsy may occur. Life-threatening respiratory failure often develops very rapidly in severe cases. In addition, possible involvement of the autonomic nervous system can lead to life-threatening abnormalities of blood pressure regulation, cardiac rhythm, central respiratory drive, and less commonly bladder function. The diagnosis of GBS syndrome is mainly clinical. It is confirmed by the characteristic CSF findings, which is known as albuminocytological dissociation, in which CSF protein concentration is elevated without any accompanying elevation of the cell count. This finding was first described by Guillain and Barry in 1916. This finding may not be present in some patients until 2 or 3 weeks of the onset of the illness. Electrophysiological studies like nerve conduction studies and EMGs usually reveal focal demyelination with conduction block and less commonly axonal lesions. In mild cases, general supportive care is all that is needed without close monitoring of muscle strength and vital capacity. In severe cases with profound weakness and rapidly progressive respiratory dysfunction, intravenous infusion of immunoglobulins is indicated. It is given in a dose of 0.4 grams per kg body weight daily for 5 days. A second course of treatment can be given 4 weeks later if needed. Plasmapheresis is an effective alternate for patients who cannot afford immunoglobulins or who have contraindications to immunoglobulin therapy. Patients with rapidly ascending paralysis and impending respiratory failure must be hospitalized in an ICU setting so that their circulatory and respiratory functions can be closely monitored and they can be intubated without delay if needed. Cardiac complications and pain are treated symptomatically. Patients who develop dysphagia are fed through a nasogastric tube or a gastrotomy tube. Other important elements of care include prophylaxis against deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism and urinary catheterization if needed. Physiotherapy is an important part of management of GBS syndrome. Prognosis is generally favorable. Intensive care may be needed in the acute phase, but once it is passed, the weakness usually resolves in all affected muscles. The muscles that were weak first recover last. Recovery may take several months, however, even up to 2 years in severe cases. Permanent muscle weakness and atrophy, especially distal muscles, is not uncommon. Most of the death caused by GBS syndrome are attributable to prolonged immobility leading to pneumonia, pulmonary embolism, or it may be caused by autonomic dysfunction leading to respiratory failure and sudden cardiac death. Chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. It is a chronic variant of polyradiculitis and is pathophysiologically similar to the acute variant GBS. It develops over a period of 8 weeks or more. The weakness and autonomic dysfunction are usually less severe than in GBS syndrome, but they last longer. The idiopathic form of this condition is presumed to have an autoimmune basis. Immunoglobulins are found in the CSF and immunoglobulin deposits are seen in biopsy specimens of the sural nerve. There are also forms of CIDP associated with HIV and systemic lupus erythematosus. Clinical features of CIDP differ from those of GD syndrome, particularly in its temporal course, because it has a slower onset and it has a chronic relapsing remitting course. Possibly and often it is associated with pain. It may have symmetrical or asymmetrical distribution of the neurological deficits. Recurrent carrier nerve involvement can occur in this syndrome. Central nerve manifestations are more common in CIDP than in GBS. Nerve conduction studies reveal evidence of focal demyelination or axonal involvement, marked elevation of CSF protein concentration, often combined with an elevated immunoglobulin G concentration. Cell count is usually normal. Fluctuation of the signs and symptoms is also typical of CIDP. There may be phases of complete remission followed by relapse. Sometimes manifestations may progress slowly over a long period of time. Diagnostic evaluation includes nerve conduction studies which show slowed nerve conduction or partial conduction blocks and a delayed or absent F wave. In cases with axonal involvement, electromyography reveals low amplitude summation of muscle potentials and abnormal spontaneous muscle activity. CIDP can be treated effectively with corticosteroid and immunoglobulins and with plasmapheresis. Depending on the response, long-term treatment may be needed either with immunoglobulins or with immunosuppressive agents like corticosteroids, azathioprine and cyclophosphamide. Corticosteroids are indicated to treat CIDP, but they are not indicated in GBS. CIDP takes either a relapsing remitting course or a chronic progressive course. The first form, that is relapsing remitting form, carries a better prognosis. More than half of all patients need long-term treatment. Cranial polyradiculitis. Cranial nerves may be involved as a component of ascending polyradiculitis, in which case it usually arises only after the limbs have become weakened. Sometimes, however, it is the first manifestation or the only clinical manifestation of polyradiculitis. The differential diagnosis of patients with cranial polyradiculitis must always include borreliosis, known as Lyme's disease, and chronic meningitis. Miller-Fisher syndrome is a form of cranial polyradiculitis that mainly affects young men. It shares a pathogenesis with encephalitis, in which brainstem involvement predominates. Clinical features of Miller-Fisher syndrome include ophthalmoplegia, somatosensory ataxia, areflexia, and sometimes pupillary involvement. Facial nerve palsy may be a part of Miller-Fisher syndrome, and sometimes it may be accompanied by brain stem signs. Electrophysiological studies show an evidence of a sensory axonal neuropathy. Diagnostic evaluation includes typical clinical features and serological manifestation of antiganglioside antibodies GQ1A and GQ1B. The CSF concentration of protein is elevated. Miller-Fisher syndrome has a favorable prognosis and generally needs no specific treatment. Hereditary motor sensory neuropathies are a form of genetic neuropathies. There are many types of hereditary motor sensory neuropathies, but the most common is HMSN type 1, which is also known as Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. It has a prevalence of 2 per 100,000 persons. It is an autosomal dominant disease. At least 5 causative genetic mutations have been identified. About 70-80% of cases are due to duplication of the PMP22 gene on the chromosome 17. Clinically, early manifestation is pes cavus, later followed by atrophy of the calf muscles. Thigh muscles remain in their normal bulk. There is typical clinical finding which is known as inverted champagne bottle sign. As the disease progresses, predominantly distal muscle atrophy is seen in the upper limbs as well. Distal sensory impairment may not arise until much later, and even then it is usually mild. Nerve conduction studies reveal marked slowing of nerve conduction. Histopathological examination of the smooth nerve specimens reveal axon degeneration, myelin changes, and an onion skin like Schwann cells. The course of hereditary motor sensory neuropathy type 1 is characterized by very slow progression. Patients can often keep working until the normal retirement age or beyond. This diagram shows the clinical findings of hereditary motor sensory neuropathy type 1 in a 30 years old man. Diagram A shows mainly distal muscle atrophy visible in the calves and feet. Diagram B shows atrophy of the intrinsic hand muscles. Diagram C and D show pes cavus with claw-like toes because of atrophy of and loss of the internal muscle of the feet. Another very important cause of polyneuropathies is diabetes mellitus. All over the world, diabetic neuropathy is the second most common type of polyneuropathy. Only other neuropathy which is more common than diabetes is alcohol-induced neuropathy. About 20 to 40% of diabetic patients have some degree of diabetic polyneuropathy, which typically starts in patients who have suffered from diabetes for 5 to 10 years or more, and it is more common in patients aged 6 to 70 years. In 10% of patients with diabetic neuropathy, it is the only diagnostic evaluation which brings neuropathy into consideration. Patients have no signs and symptoms of neuropathy. Polyneuropathy is caused both by diabetic vascular disease and by a direct effect of elevated blood sugar. Axon degeneration is usually the most prominent histological finding, although segmental demyelination is sometimes well marked as well. Clinical features of diabetic polyneuropathy include irritative sensory symptoms, which include paresthesias and often burning dysesthesia of the feet. The latter is particularly disturbing when the feet are warm, for example at night under a blanket. In typical patients, Achilles reflexes are absent and there is a mainly distal impairment of touch and vibration sense. Vibration sense is lost first of all. Later about how the affected patients develop motor deficits as well. The neurological deficits may be asymmetric or there may be isolated disease of an individual nerve such as cranial nerve 3, 4 or 6 palsies or femoral nerve palsy. Disturbances of the autonomic nervous system are also typical, leading to dry mouth, often red skin, bladder dysfunction, orthostatic hypotension, tachycardia, diarrhea, and erectile dysfunction in young males. Treatment includes, first of all, optimal glycemic control. The neuropathic pain of diabetic neuropathy, which is often very disturbing, is treated with anticonvulsant drugs such as pregabalin and gabapentin. Alternatively, it can be treated with tricyclic antidepressants such as amitriptyline. Opioids may be necessary in severe cases. If the pain of diabetic neuropathy is locally circumscribed, it can be treated topically with the capsaicin or lidocaine ointment. Thank you.